now worth buying? In this video, we are going to find out. My name is Matt, I'm a former rocket scientist.
Should you buy the Core Ultra 9 or Ryzen 7?
My goal is to help you make the right component choices and put them together the right way every single time. In the UPC FC series, Intel conducted an investigation and determined memory latency, and they estimated that this issue impacted performance anywhere from 6 to 30% setting responsible. To see the impact of these changes on performance, I decided performance enhancements will be enabled by a new firmware that is currently an AMD AM5 Open Bench Tables 48-48-90, increasing 1% lows for cyber%. In order to thoroughly test the CPUs,
I'm introducing the components.
enhanced memory overclocking, I was able to use a kit of DDR5 9000 QDIMM RAM in Gear 2. However, the motherboard that I used to test the QDIMM kit did a decent job. In Intel Extreme Tuning Utility, or XTU. I like this tool because you can rapidly make changes directly in Windows, thereby avoiding having to reboot into BIOS every time you make a change. When you go to the Intel XTU download page, make sure you download version 10.x or later, which supports the new Intel Core Ultra processors. Intel, for some unknown reason, decided to list it second on the download page to make things just a little more confusing. When you first load XTU, you will be presented with the basic view. I would recommend starting with your efficient cores for Arrow Lake CPUs. Based on my testing, I've found that increasing the E-core frequency will give you a relatively large increase in performance. You can use the built-in benchmark to baseline your system, however, I've found it to give somewhat inconsistent results with each run, so if you do plan to use it, I recommend running it 3 times and taking an average. You can then increase the ratio by 1x and rerun the benchmark. You are looking for best performance, not the highest. A more comprehensive tool like core ratio on the overclocking page. After you're done tuning your CPU cores, you can go back into XT file in BIOS, change your power plan in Windows. Keep that in mind if you don't have a application optimization or APO, which is a Windows app that optimizes thread scheduling for selected game titles. As mentioned earlier in the video, Intel acknowledged that the APO was not functioning correctly with Core Ultra 200S processors, but that the issue has since been fixed in later versions of Windows. So I decided to try it with Total War Warhammer 3. Install high-speed RAM, turn XMP on, and adjust memory sub-timings. 2. Overclock performance and efficient cores. 3. Overclock ring ratio, the largest increases in high bandwidth support on. 2. Undervolted with a negative all-core curve offset. 3. Increase the PBO limits and set a platform thermal throttle. Ultimate performance and turn memory integrity off. A comprehensive step-by-step guide for how to implement all of these tweaks is contained in my recent How to Tweak an AMD AM5 Ryzen CPU test. In this video, we pitted 2 top CPUs against each other in the PC Octagon to see who will emerge victorious, with the Intel Core Ultra 9 285K in the blue corner, taking on the current king of gaming, the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D in the red corner. The round-by-round results show a decisive victory for the 9800X3D, with 10 wins, 4 losses, and 4 draws across 18 hard-fought rounds. When you look at the performance across 17 games, you see that the 285K loses the 1% low battle, especially at lower resolutions and game settings, where games are more heavily CPU-bound. As the games become more GPU-bound, however, it's able to not only match the 9800X3D, but beat it in average FPS by around 5%, which is quite impressive. If we now look at professional workloads such as Blender and 7-Zip, the 285K dominates with advantages of over 50%, which is not surprising given the much higher core count. The good news with the new Core Ultra 200S processors is that this performance comes with significant improvements in efficiency, with the 285K able to beat the 9800X3D in 3D Mark time spy, while losing
So what was that Blender? CPU power efficiency. For gaming, Ryzen and
workloads such as Blender and
Blender. The Core Ultra 9 has advantage. I'm still thinking, which is good. So maybe specific for gaming, Ryzen 7 is good. Ryzen 7 9800. But the other use in general, Core Ultra 9 is better. And also, I think it's Core Ultra 7 is better than Ryzen 7 9800.
Approximately $120 more than the 9800X3D at the time of filming this video. If you now add the cost of the RAM as well, then the 285K DDR5 9000 combo is around $300 or 46% more expensive than the 9800X3D DDR.
So after Ryzen 9 new one is released, it will be compared Ryzen 9, Core Ultra 9. I think that's the thing. It's the price is different, Ryzen 7 and Core Ultra 9.
5 8000 combo. If you convert that into gaming value or FPS per dollar at 1080p, then the 9800X3D provides a knockout blow by offering over 60% better value in gaming when compared to the 285K, which is obviously not great for Intel. With that said, these results do offer up some interesting choices. On the one hand, if you're building a new gaming focused system and you want the very best, then based on these results, I would recommend buying a 9800X3D if you can find it. It's a
So for gaming, Ryzen is really good.
truly amazing
the
gaming
price.
chip that offers outstanding performance at an equally great price. However, if you do a lot of professional workloads in addition to gaming, and you believe that Intel will indeed improve gaming performance with their next
Is it the update kind of things? Cinebench, Blender, gaming, power efficiency.
firmware update, then the 285K might be an attractive option. It will unfortunately cost you more, and availability of the 285K is not that much better than the 9800X3D, but it might finally offer Intel fans a compelling reason to upgrade. I was actually quite impressed with how competitive the 285K was in these tests. The only thing really letting it down is the price, which is something Intel can do something about. Hopefully they can come through with their new firmware update in
Why? What we see for Cinebench, mark document. Why? There was some short one.
Look, I'm telling you, my performance uplift ain't that bad.
That's
I
for
know
one
we have no
Intel.
performance gains compared to the 14900K, but the efficiency is better. It's like 45 something better.
No, for the last time, I'm not interested in buying you.
Hey, you know what product is good. Oh.
Hello.
Oh, hi AMD. How you doing?
Just wanted to let you know that I have new CPU. Wanna buy me?
Yes!
Let's go have some gaming.
Let's go to my place. I'll insert you to my computer.
I am 50% better than Intel.
I know that you're the best. Wink, wink.
Yeah, I feel the same. Oh, this will be the next new CPU, right?
This is one of the most important reviews that I'm gonna make this year. I finally bought the Ryzen 9 19950X, the flagship, the best CPU that AMD has. I finally compared it to the Core Ultra 9 285K. And you think, why is this important? It's important because this guy over here, the RTX 50 90. And this guy slightly changed the game because one might not have the edge over the other anymore. I want to know how good is the Ryzen 9 9950X against the Intel in creative workflows, and some of the things that I've seen other reviewers make already. They weren't kind of happy with the Intel, they weren't kind of happy with the AMD. What I'm happy with is that these guys are battling it out on the top, and that means we're going to take the benefit. As creators, this is one of the best times to build a creator PC, but which one is better? There's a lot to talk about. Let's go. Go check out our full overview in the video description focusing on the AMD. If you want to see the Intel side, go check out the 285K review. We're focusing on AMD here. So in terms of core count, nothing has changed. In terms of clock speeds, Mac turbo frequency, nothing's changed either. Both of the 9950X and 7950X boosts to the same level. The base frequency though has gone down on the AMD to 4.3 from 4.5. And this is one of the things that AMD is trying to do to make it more efficient. Intel actually tried to do the same thing. Remember 4900K pulling power, and now 285K more efficient at the same power draw. That is good news actually, because now we're not just cranking the performance up, putting bigger turbos on these chips, cracking some more nitrous on it, making the cylinders bigger, putting more boost. No, not really. We're trying to evolve, we're trying to make it a little bit more clever. Now it's still hyper threading on it, so it's got big performance cores with 2 threads per core. Whereas on the Intel now skipped completely multi-threading. There's only single threading on all of the P and E cores, which is interesting. Max PCI generation, PCI 5. There's PCI lanes, 24 lanes on each as well, DDR5. In terms of cache, it hasn't changed, L2 cache either, but I found very specific in somewhere in some specs, I can see that the L1 cache has actually changed from 64 kilobytes to 80 kilobytes. So the fine first fastest cache in there has actually increased. The base power hasn't increased at all, and the turbo power has actually come down. And we'll talk about the power draw a little bit later, but you can see 7950X was pulling 230, now we're around 200. iGPU is exactly the same, and in terms of process node, now this is interesting. AMD has always been ahead with the process node, you know, whenever you can remember. TSMC 7, Intel was still on 14 on Intel. Whenever AMD went back down to 5, then Intel was on 7, and so on. Now Intel is using the 3 nanometer TSMC, probably like similar what Apple is using. The 9950X is using 4 nanometer TSMC node. So Intel now is ahead in terms of the process node. Pricing though, this is where things get very messy and very interesting. These prices are at the point of me making the video, 31st of January, and whenever you're watching the video, please let me know in the comment section below what it costs in your local store right now. What's the most expensive one? And by the time you're watching this, the prices might have changed, so I highly recommend checking out the latest pricing in the video description.
The price. So
cost in your local store right now. What's the most expensive?
999950. Is Core i9, right? It's the same price.
One, and by the time you're watching this, the prices might have changed, so I highly recommend checking out the latest pricing in the video description below. The 285K is the most expensive CPU in here. The 9950X is actually slightly cheaper, $20 cheaper. The 7950X is a little bit cheaper, under $500, and then the 4900K is $433. After the benchmarks, we're gonna come back to the pricing, but what makes it a little bit of a mixed bag is when we look at the motherboards. I was looking at the motherboard Z890 versus X870 on AMD this way, and I saw that AMD's motherboards are always a little bit more expensive than Intel's Z890. So if we count the motherboard price difference into the mix of the CPU, we're kinda at the same ballpark now. I think AMD probably lowered their prices because they knew that the motherboards are more expensive. They're very, very similar. We're talking about $10, $20 the same price. So we really have to know now which one is better because they kind of cost the same. In terms of the test bench setup, on AMD I'm using the ProWatt X870E created Wi-Fi.
So the PC price might be the same. The CPU, motherboard, that's the balance. Intel is expensive, but motherboard is cheap. Maybe because it's produced more. And also I'm thinking about the next generation, change the CPU, like motherboard compatibility and things. Intel maybe next generation okay, but next maybe not. I'm not sure about AMD next okay, next okay. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking about these. I'm thinking too.
The Core Ultra is tested on the Gigabyte Z 8090 Aorus Elite X Ice. Different RAM for all of them. I'll talk about that in a minute. The GPU is RTX 4090, not 5090. I'll explain that in a minute as well. For the cooler, we've got 360mm cooler or AIO on all of them. And we're using a Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut for the best cooling performance. And because of the best cooling performance, none of them are thermal throttling. In terms of the operating system, we're using Samsung 980 Pro and sometimes Project Drive 980 Pro as well. I'm not bothered about games at all. And just a side note, AMD and Intel, both of them, when testing with games, you know, when they sent out the review units, Intel did that and AMD does that as well. They recommend you using RAM DIMM sticks that are above their factory specs. They're telling you to use faster RAM that they officially support. And what happens when you use RAM that is out of factory spec? The warranty gets kind of messy. Now, we've seen that Intel's been very good at the warranties and giving them the CPUs, you know, if something's happened to the CPU, even if your XMP was on or whatever. The same with AMD. Just so you know, legally when you take them to court, you're probably gonna lose. But if you go to the shop, you're probably gonna get a refund. I don't know what kind of world we live in. But the memory controller is very important for creators because if we want more DIMM sticks and faster RAM, we need a good IMC. The 285K here has the best IMC right now. They support 6400 megatransfers per second, but on the fine specs it says that officially that should be a CU DIMM, not a UDIMM. AMD Ryzen doesn't support CU DIMMs, and CU DIMMs will run a lot faster. We've got some 8500, 9000 CU DIMMs. It's going to be super fast with the CU DIMMs. So Intel is leading in terms of the IMC. If you look at the 9950X, official spec is 5600 megatransfers per second if you have 2 DIMMs. If you have 4 DIMM sticks, then the official goes down to 3600, which is very, very low. It's kind of like DDR4 speeds, which is embarrassing. All of this is kind of factory spec. If you're getting yourself your own one, like we just built ourselves Core Ultra system in there with an RTX 4090 from Zotac. We're using 64 mega transfers per second RAM, and this is not a CU DIMM. It's 96 gigabytes from Kingston Fury. No problem at all. It's solid as. And when you are building yourself the best bang for buck creator PC, which you can find the build guides in the video description below, get as fast RAM as you want. If it doesn't work, it's unstable, just tune it down a little bit, you can go for it. But if you want the ultimate stability and no worries in mind and no blue screens of death, the safest bet to go.
Oh, that's the thing.
Stability and no.
This sad blue screen. That's the thing I always don't want.
Worries in mind and no blue screens of death, the safest bet to go with is the factory spec, which you can see over there. I'm pretty confident in saying that the Core Ultra 285K can run 6400 megatransfers per second as well, even without CU DIMMs, if you run dual channel and single DIMM per channel. Now we've got 2 generations of the best of Intel and AMD. 7950X, 9950X, 285K and 14900K. Just if you didn't know, you're watching this video and you're like, what the heck is 285K and 14900K? Where's 15900K? Intel changed the naming game. They started again. The new Core Ultra, which you can see over here, this is 285K, not 15900K. But in essence, in terms of naming, it slots into the 15900K. Cinebench R25, the 285K is about 8.8% faster in the single core score and about 12.3% faster in the multi-core score. Interestingly, if you look at the max turbo frequency of a single core performance, both of the CPUs have exactly the same clock speeds. So looks like Intel's getting better IPC, instructions per clock, which means that it can just carry more data, get more stuff done at the same speed, which probably is an architectural difference. Well, it really is. The 7950X is about 5% slower in the multi-core score and about 11.8% slower in the single core score. So as you can see, same clock speeds. We've gone down in transistor size a little bit. We've changed the architecture. We're getting better performance. In terms of 14900K, it's actually still a little bit faster in the single core score, about 15% slower in the multi-core score. Looking at Geekbench 6, things are a little bit more skewed. The 285K is about 3.4% slower in the single core score and only about 8.6% faster in the multi-core score. The 7950X is about 11% slower in the single core and about 8.6% slower in the multi-core score, so kind of the same as in Cinebench. 14900K, 5.6% slower in the single core score and about 2.4% faster in multi-core score. How is 14900K faster in multi-core score than the 9950X? Your guess is as good as mine. Looking at the iGPU here, the 285K has a lot more powerful iGPU inside. The Intel Arc GPU, whatever they want to call it in there, is a lot faster, as you can see here, multiple times faster, over 3 times faster. Looking at Photoshop here, and oh my goodness, is Team Blue getting an absolute obliteration. Interestingly, a few years ago, it was completely the other way. AMD is so much better in Photoshop. 21% slower in overall score, up to 24% slower in the filter score compared to 2.
So it's surprising the Ryzen is better than Intel Core Ultra on Photoshop. Oh wow. I thought it's the other side, but I'll see.
85K. That is ridiculous. Intel is getting beat here. 7950X about 13% slower in the overall score, and the 14900K is about 16% slower in the overall score. Look at that, the 7950X is still faster than the 14900K. For some weird reason, the 14900K is actually faster in Photoshop than the 285K. I have to retest the 285K because there's been a lot of BIOS and micro updates and things like that. A lot of the articles online are saying that there are really no difference, but I'm gonna test it myself.
Seems like the Core Ultra has some update or some setting or some kind of things. Something like that. It's the 14th generation Intel, right? This one, 14900K. And Core Ultra is 285K.
If you want to see that, the subscribe button is your good friend. Moving on to Lightroom Classic, and here we can see that the 285K is actually 5% faster than the 9950X. Interestingly, the active score, when you're actually working with your photos, moving faders, switching between photos, the 9950X is actually faster, which usually relates to single core performance, which synthetically is faster on Intel, but in actual application, the AMD is performing about 4% better. In passive scores, when we're utilizing multi-core score, we're exporting things, Intel is about 8.7% faster. The 7950X is about 12% slower, so we've gained a little bit of performance in there, and the 14900K is about 8% faster than the 9950X. As you can see, the 14900K is the fastest in this benchmark, so if you're looking for a good fast CPU, the 14900K might be a better pick for you, but we'll get to that in a minute. Moving on to Premiere CPU turned on, and you've seen a lot of famous YouTubers, big gaming YouTubers, they test these CPUs without the iGPU turned on. Premiere Pro and video editing is very important to turn on the iGPU. That tiny GPU inside the CPU that usually means squat and is just for troubleshooting actually has some super interesting and fast media engines inside that accelerates your media playback, especially when you're working with H.264 and 5. And Intel calls it Intel QuickSync, which you can apply in Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. I'm testing it with RTX 4090. And at this point, because the 50 series support that we have in here, that I said in the intro, Premiere Pro still doesn't actually support. So I can't fully utilize all of these media engines, and there's no point in testing it with the 5090 for now. We have to wait for Adobe to update it, then things get even more interesting. So this here is both of them iGPU on, dedicated GPU RTX 4090, and let's take a look at these results then. The 285K is 9 to 13% faster in the extended and standard overall scores. I did not expect that. I expected finally AMD to be better, but I have to retest that, like I mentioned, because when we put both of these on with an RTX 5090, when we have the same media engines, and then CPU is kind of the one that makes the difference. CPU core, CPU performance is the one that matters then, and when Premiere Pro Final can utilize that, then we're gonna see a little bit of a difference. But right now, at this point, when you're buying this, and when I'm buying this, that's what we're seeing. If you have a 50 series, it might skew the result a little bit. And you can see that with long GOP scores. AMD is not far behind, only 15.8% faster is the 285K. When we have the RTX 5090, we'll have to see how this is gonna perform. Because if we turn the 285K iGPU off, then AMD is gonna win. But the question now is, how well does Premiere Pro utilize the codecs? Is it gonna use Intel QuickSync, or is it gonna use the NVIDIA media engines? Generally, everything is slightly faster on the Intel, apart from the long GOP scores where the Intel QuickSync clips in, and we're about 15 to 23% roughly faster in there. Interestingly, raw standard score is a lot faster on the 285K compared to the 9950X. I would have assumed that 16P performance cores with multi-threading has a lot more power in there, but hey, what do I know? The 7950X is about 4.3 to 4.9% slower, so we've gained roughly about 5 up to 9% between the generations. The 14900K is actually 5 to 6.6% faster in the extended and standard overall scores compared to the 9950X. Wait a second, the 14900K is still faster, and the 14900K is 55K? Maybe not. Can you tell 10? No. The 9950X, so they perform a 7% slower in these scenes. So we haven't gained that much performance over the previous generation. Now let's think about that. New generation, we would expect 1% slower in the 14. Remember when making Intel just limitless and let them. We're gonna have to do another see you later warranty. We probably performing better. This platform of Intel, there is bigger jumps. Let's have a look at the CPU. Not even, it doesn't really matter. It's bang for buck, very good. You can still get very good parts for it. This is the best bang for buck. Then the 7950X is another one of those that's still really, really good. You might want to go with the 12-core 7900X and then wait for the 119950X, whatever the next generation is going to be. AMD is probably going to have to start again. They will. Probably will. I'll give it till the end of the year, and then you'll get something like AI Max Chips Pro, Ultra, AMD, Ryzen, Threadripper Pro Max, something like that it will be called, most likely, because they're naming. Honestly, you need very certain, less than 10%. In some cases, yes, AMD have ironed out their quirks. We can update the BIOS, have to do this test. But
Alright, what's your thought about Intel and AMD? Which is your choice? Please write on the comment. I'm still thinking and I need to decide. Alright, write on the comment.